Good afternoon, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope you're well. Today is Wednesday. It is the 29th of July. We're getting ready for Parshas Ekev. I'm sorry that it seems that due to a technical glitch, the recording of this Parsha shir, that when it was done live, did not go through. So I'm going to record the first of the Divrei Torah that we shared earlier this afternoon. So in Parshas Ekev, if you remember, we're in the period of the year right now that's known as the Shiva de Nechemta. There are 7 weeks um, between a Tisha B'Av and the Yom Noraim, where we're going to be reading Haftorahs that all speak of Nechama, all speak of redemption, all speak of consolation to Klal Yisrael after having gone through the period of the 3 weeks, the 9 days, and then Tisha B'Av. In the spirit of that, we're all thinking of the Geula. And therefore, I think it's appropriate that we start with the famous saying from our Chachamim that you'll find in Maseches Megillah. It says, Amar Rav Elazar, Amar Rav Chanina, Kol Omer Davar B'Shem Omro. Anyone who repeats something in the name of the person who originally said it, maybe Geula Li'olam, brings redemption to the world. And the Gemara goes on to prove this from Megillah Esther itself, from how Esther shared the news of the plot against King Achashverosh by Big Son and Seresh. She didn't just say it over to the king anonymously, she shared it B'Shem Mordechai, in the name of Mordechai, and the end result of that was that the king wanted to reward Mordechai, and that brought about the redemption that all of Klal Yisrael experienced. In that theme, that if we want to bring the Gula, specifically during this time of the Shiva de Nechemta, where we're thinking about the Gula, it makes sense that if we're repeating something, say it over in the name of the person who we heard it from. I want to share with you a Divrei Torah I heard from one of my Rabbeim in Yeshiva over 30 years ago. I was doing some math. I realized it was the end of the summer of 1994, so it's 32 years ago. And I want to share with you a beautiful Dvar Torah from one of my Rabbeim at the Yeshiva in Milwaukee at Witz. His name was Rabbi Peretz Zakai. Rabbi Peretz Zakai was one of the Rabbeim in the Beis Medrash, phenomenal Talmud Chacham who has a heart of gold, one of the most sincere people you'll ever meet in your life. Rabbi Zakai shared the following Dvar Torah, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. In Parshas Ekev, this week's Parsha, right at the beginning of Perek Ches, there's a very famous Rashi on Pasuk Aleph. Rashi's quoting a Midrash Tanchuma. Let's take a look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Klal Yisrael, Kol ha-mitzvah asher anochi mitzavcha hayom. All of the mitzvahs that I'm instructing you to observe today, tishmeru lasos, make sure to keep them. L'man tichyun, in order that you should live, revisem, that you should multiply, uvasam virishtem es haaretz, and you will come into the land of Israel, and you'll also fully inherit the land. Asher nishba Hashem lavosechem. That land that God promised to your ancestors, it's contingent. Your ability to live there, your ability to thrive there, and exist and to last there is going to be contingent upon your keeping the Torah and the mitzvahs in its absolute entirety. That's the plain reading of the pasuk. Rashi quotes a Medrash Tanchuma that says, "Umidrash Agada." The Medrash has a beautiful teaching on this pasuk. Im yischalta b'mitzvah. It teaches us that if we go ahead and begin to be engaged in a mitzvah, Gomorosa, make sure to finish it. Don't leave it half-baked. Shena nikras ela al shem gomra. Because a mitzvah is always given full credit. It'll be identified with the party that actually completes it. What's the proof for this? Shenemar, the Navi in Sefer Yoshua tells us that when it's talking about the burial of Yosef in Shechem, it says V'esatzmos Yosef, the remains of Yosef, Asher ha'alu b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim, that b'nei Yisrael had hauled out of Egypt, that they had taken up from Egypt, all those remains of Yosef, covered b'Shechem, they were buried in Shechem. And that's from Perek Chavdal, chapter 24 in Yoshua. But what do you mean, La Losam? How are you telling me that these were the remains of Yosef that Bnei Yisrael took out of Mitzrayim? They didn't take him out of Mitzrayim. It was Moshe alone. Moshe was the one Jew that final night in Mitzrayim. The Torah tells us while everyone else was worried about Bizas Mitzrayim, they were knocking on door to door, and they were asking for reparations for all those years of slavery in Egypt. The one person who busied himself with finding Yosef's remains, because he understood that Bnei Israel couldn't leave Mitzrayim without Yosef's remains, because he had made his brothers promise before his passing that they would, when it was time to leave, they would take him out. Moshe Rabbeinu himself was searching for those remains and was busy about retrieving them. So how on earth in Sefer Yoshua, how does it attribute Bnei Yisrael as being the ones who took Yosef's remains out of Egypt. It was Moshe alone. So the Medrash answers, Elul Fishlo, he speak Lagamra. True, Moshe started the job, but he wasn't able to complete it. Therefore, since he wasn't able to complete it, Gomru Yisrael was the Jewish people who completed the task, Nikras al Shemam. In a certain sense, they are credited for it. Now, obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reward Moshe for all of his efforts. And he might, up in Shemayim, in the ledger, might even give him credit up there as if he had done it, because Moshe wanted to see the mission through to completion. However, when it's being recorded for posterity in Sefer Yoshua, when the Navi records it for posterity, as far as who was the party responsible for taking Yosef out of Mitzrayim, Bnei Yisrael is given the credit for it. Why? Because Bnei Yisrael were the ones who completed the task. Therefore, the Medrash teaches us, kol mitzvah, every mitzvah, whenever we get engaged in a mitzvah and we start being involved, we have to see it through to completion. If you begin to do a mitzvah, gemorosa, finish it. Don't leave a half-baked job. That is the teaching of this Medrash that Rashi brings down, and it's all rooted in this pasuk. And we think about it. I think we all know people in life who are great people, well-meaning people, but they leave a trail behind them of half-started projects. They had the best of intentions, but they lost interest somewhere along the lines, or the going got tough and they moved on to the next project. I know I've got a friend like that. He's the nicest person in the world. So much fun to be around, but I don't know if he's ever completed a task that he started. It could be he gets distracted. It could be that, gets faced with adversity and just moves on to something else. Whatever it might be, I just remember noting about him that, isn't that interesting? He just never seems to finish what he began. And it's something that after noticing Rashi quote this Medrash, it's something that I try to live by. You want to make sure that we finish what we began. However, as important as this yisod, as important as this principle is, there is definitely a potential pitfall. Because if we get in the habit of thinking that we're only going to be credited for jobs that we finish, that can very easily discourage a person from getting started with tasks in the first place. Because how many tasks, if we look at them and if we assess whether or not I want to get involved in a project, if my sole criteria is, will I be able to finish it, we may find ourselves not getting involved in all that much because they're so hard to imagine. How am I going to finish it? Especially a very meaningful project. It could take years until that comes to fruition. It could take a very long time. And a person might say, nah, it's just not worth it. If I'm not going to be given credit for it, what's the point of getting involved? I only want to get involved in projects that I know I'm going to be able to finish. So I remember Rabbi Zakkai pointing out to us, we have to avoid that attitude, and that's based on another Rashi from last week's Parsha in Veschanan. So the next source we have is in Devarim. It's Perek Dalid, and we're going to take a look at 3 psukim, Mem Aleph through Mem Gimel, and it deals with the Ir Miklat. The Ir Miklat was the city of refuge for unintentional killers, and the Torah instructed Moshe to established 6 of them. 3 were supposed to be on the east side of the Jordan and of the Yarden, and 3 of them on the west side in Eretz Yisrael proper. So the pasuk tells us last week in Veschanan, read it in pasuk Mem Aleph in Perek Daled. It says, "Ozi Avdil Moshe Shalosh Arim Be'Iver HaYarden Mizrach HaShemesh." Then, before his passing, Moshe Rabbeinu established, he planted the flag for where the first 3 Arei Miklat were going to be, on the east side of the Jordan. And then it tells us, the next pasuk just reminds us of the purpose of an Ir Miklat. It says, Lanu Shama Rotseach Asher Yirtzach Esreyehu Bivlidas. This was the city that was intended for an unintentional killer to flee to after having committed that unintentional murder. It qualifies it by telling us he didn't hate the other party. This was totally unplanned. It was not premeditated. And he has to run to one of these cities, one of the Arei Miklat, and there he will live. Mem Gimel, one more pasuk, and then it names the 3 that Moshe established, where he planted those flags. As Betzer Bamidbar Beretz Amishor Ruveni, in the Chelek, in the section of Ruvain, in the land of Ruvain, he set up the first one that was called Betzer. As Ramos Bagilad Lagadi, in the land that was going to go to Gad, he set up the second one that was named Ramos or Ramot. And then in Golan Babashal Manashi, in where half the Sheba Menashe was, in Golan, in Bashan, that's where he set up Golan. That's where the 3rd one was set up. Okay, let's see Rashi. And Rashi here quotes from the Gemara Maseches Makos. Rashi says, What does it mean, Az Yavdil? Then, right then and there, Moshe, he designated those three Arei Miklat. Nasan Lev, he committed himself. Lios Chared Ladavar Sheavdilaim. He went ahead and he set his heart and he hastened himself to implement this matter, to designate these areas. Even though they couldn't function as an Ir Miklat, people couldn't seek refuge there until the other three would be established, set up in the land of Canaan on the west side of the Jordan. So why did Moshe get involved? Moshe's attitude was, mitzvah shef shalakaima kaimena. If I have an opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah, even if I'm not going to be able to finish it, if I can play some part in the process, I have to jump and get involved. I have the ability to get involved in doing and bringing the Ratzon Hashem, God's will, to reality, to bring it to fruition. How can I not get involved? Will I be able to finish it? No, but let me do what I can. Will I receive credit for it? No, because as we learned from the Medrash that first Rashi quoted, and this was Parshas Ekev, in a mitzvah nemra al Hashem gomra, the person who ultimately will receive credit, who will be attributed to, is the one who completed it. Moshe knows that, and he knows he's not going to be able to complete this task because the Arei Miklat can't function until all six are established, and Moshe can't be there to establish the next three because those are going to be on the west side of the Jordan where he can't go into the land of Israel. But nonetheless, even though he knows that he's not going to be able to finish this task, that did not prevent him, that didn't discourage him from getting involved. Why? Because he said, mitzvah she'efshar l'kaima akaimena. If I could play a part in bringing a mitzvah to fulfillment, let me play a role, even if I won't be able to accomplish it. So I remember Rabbi Zakkai telling us the lesson here is so clear. It's telling us what is the idea. What is the idea? Yes, our goal should be that we want to finish a mitzvah, and if I get involved in something, let's see it through to completion. But knowing that I'm not going to be able to see a project through to completion should not prevent me from getting involved in the first place. I shouldn't just stay on the couch and loaf off because I'll say, what's the point? I'm not going to be able to finish it. Who cares? Even if I'm not going to be able to finish it, and even if the Navi won't record it in my name, can I play a part in bringing this to fruition? That's worth an immense amount of value. That can't be measured. And that's what Moshe said. Mitzvah she'efshar l'kaima kamena. I can play a role in establishing the first three. You're right. They won't function until the other three are set up. But how can I sit on the sidelines? I have a chance to get involved. This really reminds us of the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos and Perek Beis in the second chapter that says, Lo alecha amlacha ligmor. Our attitude should be that it's not our duty to complete the task. However, at the same time, the other side of the coin is, but we're not free to desist, to not get involved. Of course, I want to be there. My goal, my aspiration should be that I want to finish, I want to complete this mitzvah. But it's so often, that's just out of my reach. This is a project that's huge. It's beyond me. I've got to get other people involved. At some point, I'm going to have to pass the baton. Whatever the reason, I'm not going to be able to finish this, but still get involved. I might not ultimately be credited. The Navi, a prophet, won't credit me for having completed it, and therefore I won't get the full recognition. That shouldn't prevent me from getting involved. Moshe Rabbeinu's attitude was, mitzvah she'efshar l'kaima kaimena. If I can play any part in the process, that's worth its weight in gold. How can I not get involved? That's what our attitude should be. And that's exactly that teaching in Maseches and Pirkei Avos. That's what it's telling us. Lo alecha amlacha ligmor. Of course, I want to aspire to finish the job, but that's not always possible. And don't let that discourage me. I should say to myself, it's not my job to finish. That's my hope. That's my aspiration. But that should never be the criteria for when I get involved. Lo alecha amlacha ligmor. That should not prevent me from getting involved just because I can't finish it. Because I can't sit on the sideline. If there's something positive to be done, if there's a mitzvah, if the Jewish people need something, if the world needs something, and I have a chance to be involved, I have to get involved. My goal, my ultimate aspiration should be to finish it, but knowing that I won't be able to should never discourage me from getting involved. Mitzvah she'efshar l'kaima kamena. Moshe Rabbeinu taught us, if I can have a hand, if I can play a role in making, in bringing a mitzvah project and bringing something positive to Bnei Israel, bring something positive to the world, I should jump at that opportunity. Ultimately, whether or not I'm going to be able to finish it, that's not in my hands. My job is to say, how can I be involved? And if we all can adopt that attitude of Moshe Rabbeinu, God willing, we can all play a role, a significant role, in bringing about the Geula Shalema, that ultimate redemption that we daven for each and every day. Have a good day, everyone.